Bir sandviçler, sandviç. Bir sandviç.
He asked if it were possible to make up a story that had no moral or meaning. We discussed how the ideal story should begin innocently like a fairy tale, be frightening like a nightmare in the middle, and conclude sadly like a love story ending in separation. Somewhere in the streets of Istanbul, there lived another Orhan, so much like me that he could pass for my own twin. I'm nothing but a corpse now, a body at the bottom of a well. Though I drew my last breath long ago and my heart has stopped beating, no one, apart from that vile murderer, knows what's happened to me.
Orhan Pamuk is one of the few Turks known far beyond their country, along with the modernizer Ataturk and today's Iron Fist, President Erdogan. Pamuk was thrust to fame by two momentous events. He was put on trial for speaking out about the fate of Turkey's Armenians. And he won the Nobel Prize for Literature.
You have made your native city an indispensable literary territory equal to Dostoevsky's St. Petersburg, Joyce's Dublin or Proust's Paris. A place where readers from all corners of the world can live another life just as credible as their own.
Pamuk's own sense of leading a double life and the tensions he lives under spill over into a museum he's created. A museum of history, mystery and longing. This is the story of a writer's love affair with his changing city.
In a city, you can be alone in a crowd. In fact, what makes the city a city is that it lets you hide the strangeness in your mind inside its teeming multitudes.
Oh, hello.
Very nice to see you. Great to be here.
Please come in.
Thank you. My God, what a view.
But it's not sharp today.
I like Istanbul's winter better than summer. Why? Probably because of my childhood. I like the black and white Istanbul, the melancholic Istanbul.
Around early 2000s, this was only an office. Then I was married then I used to walk here, just like every man had an office, come to the office, go back. But after political pressures, death threats, that Turkish security police advised me, why don't I live in the same place where I write? Which I also believe good police advice, because if you write in the same space that you have your sleep, then your dreams are combined with the texts, which I'm...
That's such an Orhan line. Your dreams are combined with the text.
Or intertwined with the text. I like it when you're dreamy, and I wake up always after, like my father, after the age of 50, I never had 8 hours of sleep. I wake up in the middle of the night, and with my pajamas on, I tick, 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 sit at my table. And then I have also this.
What's the name of that building?
Cihangir Mosque. Before this, there was a monastery here. Istanbul was only there. The Topkapi is there, of course. Then there was not even a road. You come from there with a boat. Our conservative government, although they're conservatives, they are destroying a lot of old buildings. They are destroying our history. But the only thing they are preserving are the mosques. But they don't care about the rest. They don't think that history
Our identities are related to old neighborhoods, old architecture. But I don't want to complain. Look at this.
You don't want to complain, but you are complaining. This is very contradictory.
Yes,
this is your way.
This is the balance of truth in my life. I want to capture the beauty of the life. But how can you not complain when you see they are destroying that beauty?
What is the novel you're currently writing?
I'm writing a historical novel that takes place in 1900, and there is plague, Ottomans, Europeans, imposition of quarantine. There is also boys and girls and love and the richness, complexity of life in my part of the world. Quarantine is a horrible thing. People come to your house, just leave your house, there we're burning this, we're burning that. A Turkish doctor would want quarantine so that he saves the lives of his people while the people don't want that. I like these ironies. Saving the lives of people who hate you, who don't want you, who don't want your ideas, your science. And this is the decline of Ottoman Empire. Even the normal person in Ottoman Empire understood that the empire would not live long. So also this feeling of decline, death, Europe is doing so much and we cannot produce or this or that. These are my subjects.
An old pharmacist was suffering from insomnia and memory loss. He invented a drug he hoped would cure him of his affliction. And it did. This caused a certain furore. Naturally, people were excited at the idea that a Turk had finally invented something. But we were never to know if, having cured himself of insomnia, he also found his way back to the heavenly garden of memory. For the old pharmacist slept on and on, never to wake again.
In my early years, I trashed Ottoman culture till I went to New York, and I was influenced by the vast American museums, university libraries. Then I began to ask myself, well, what is my identity?
You grew up here in this extraordinary city, and yet you have to go to America to discover that there is a history.
Yes. After that, I paid attention to old culture and avant-garde literature as well. A person who was, say, reading T.S. Eliot and also Ottoman poetry was the ideal for me.
Pamuk's early book, The White Castle, was about just this, the meeting and merging of East and West, Ottoman and European. A Western slave has an Eastern owner who wants to learn all he knows about science. They gradually swap roles.
There are no Eastern persons, there are no Western persons. There are no secular persons, there are no heavily fundamentalist or religious persons. We all have it in our hearts.
In his breakthrough book, My Name is Red, Pamuk blends Ottoman history, the murder mystery, and the postmodern. In the 16th century, the Sultan's painters at the palace illustrate books with jewel-like stylized miniatures, like these.
This is one of the scene of scenes that is imitated all the time, all the time.
They feel threatened but intrigued by the new art infiltrating from the West with its realism and perspective. The Venetian artist Bellini was sent to the Sultan's court.
Bellini does a painting of a scribe. Ottoman miniaturists look at that painting and then they do a Muslim version of Bellini. They put them together and copied. Look at the hand. They added something here, right?
Yeah, what have they added?
They added a miniature.
If, under the influence of the Franks, we paint embracing our individuality, we might resemble ourselves, but we won't be ourselves.
This is the outer wall of Topkapı Palace.
Yeah.
I remember the first time that I was around here because it was something interesting and strange.
Maybe I liked it otherness.
Death occupied my mind, the silence of death. But as I passed through the gate where countless pashas had been executed, the guards acted as if they didn't even see us. My parents bought some basic pocketbooks, one of which was about Ottoman art, and I used to copy the Ottoman miniatures. When I was 13, I could tell the difference between 16th century and 18th century miniatures.
A murder scene. Between the ages of 7 and 22, I thought that I would be a painter. The desire to paint never stopped. But I killed, in a way, killed the painter in me and started writing.
You will examine books that no one else has seen. You will gaze upon incredible pictures and pages of gold, and like hunters, you will track the spoor of your prey, the murderer.
I'll show you the places that matter to me for my novel.
Yeah.
I am a tree, and I am quite lonely. I weep in the rain. For the sake of Allah, listen to what I have to say. I don't want to be a tree. I want to be its meaning.
This was built in...
It's never 1 century. Everyone adds something. But what counts is these courtyards. The more you go in, the more you're at the heart of the palace. In 1995, I'm writing My Name is Red. I came here and I was not that famous then. And the guy said, aren't you Orhan Pamuk? I was not that famous. Yes. Oh, are you going to write a book set here? And I said, very nervously, a bit feeling upset about it. And I said, yes. That day, I entered the treasury because in my book, they also entered that place.
We fearfully and silently, as in a dream, passed the treasury. I felt that I'd seen this place before and knew it well. Yes, I was in the presence of the head treasurer. He was gazing upon the illustrations that rested on a reading table where the clerk had placed them after taking them from me. The pictures remained with the head treasurer, and I passed through the gate of salutation, which had earlier felt like the gate of heaven.
It's problematic displaying miniatures. Once they're exposed to light, they die, they fade away. This place always motivates my imagination. I like old things, and not because old things represent for me national identity, national past, but they evoke other worlds, other places, and also places that I feel I have strong affinity to, but I don't know why. And my novels are also about that. My flat is there, right at Cihangir Mosque. As I showed Topkapı from my flat, now I'm showing you my flat from Topkapı.
Just as the doors of houses are closed of an evening and the city is left to darkness, painting was also abandoned. It was mercilessly forgotten that we'd once looked upon our world quite differently. The miniaturists did not grow angry and revolt, but like old men who quietly succumb to an illness, they gradually accepted the situation with humble grief and resignation.
Freud says what is repressed comes back in disguise. I am the past of Turkey coming back in postmodern clothes.
living in this city for 60 years is seeing everything change, everything change, everything change. Especially in our neighborhoods, we used to play with my brother this game. So what was this shop before? Something, a sandwich shop. But before that, a shoe shop. Before that, a bank. What about before that? Oh, yes, that. Living in a city, after a while, you learn everything, and that's your life.
Pamuk's secular upper middle class family saw themselves as looking to the future and to Europe. They were followers of Turkey's modernizing leader Ataturk and sent their children to westernized schools. They all lived in this upmarket area of Istanbul, Nişantaşı. It's unrecognizable now from those days, though their house still stands.
Welcome.
Hello.
I'm here to greet you in your own home.
This is, yes, my daughter.
Hi. Very nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
They are now in front of the family apartments. I lived here a lot of years, maybe 30 years. But it has full of so many memories.
Isn't it strange to have a building named after you?
Okay, it's a bit embarrassing, but let me explain. That's the tradition here. The family name was put in front of the apartment building as a sort of address.
This is a very posh area, very upmarket area.
Yes, that's one of the reasons that I'm not living here. The spirit of the place is lost. It used to be old 2-story, 3-story high buildings. A lot of consulates too here, gardens. There used to be wooden houses here. Then those houses were all torn down.
What's your memories of this building?
During my childhood, we lived in another apartment building just one street away. We visited relatives here, and I knew that it was very central to my father's work, especially for the Museum of Innocence and the Black Book.
Memories you thought you'd lost forever came flooding back into your mind. Memories you'd forgotten you forgot. It's like being a child again and pulling out an old cabinet to find behind it all these coloured pencils, combs and lavender marbles you'd forgotten you lost.
This is probably my first photo in my life. This is my father.
These are all you,
Yes.
Yeah?
This is my mother and my brother. I'm not jealous of their intimacy, Alan.
Really?
This is at the balcony of Pamuk Apartments. And one of these buildings are still there.
We lived on the 4th floor, but I had the run of the entire building from the time I was old enough to climb off my mother's lap, and can recall that on each floor there was at least one piano. When my last bachelor uncle put his newspaper down long enough to get married, and his new wife moved into the 1st floor apartment from which he was to spend the next half-century gazing out of the window, she brought her piano with her.
Who is that?
This is me.
No one ever played on this piano or any of the others.
And my brother.
I assumed pianos were places for exhibiting photographs.
My grandfather died early. My grandmother was the powerful person carrying a set of keys and shouting at everyone and scolding, although she never left the apartment building. But she was controlling the whole population, and her cook was the cook for the whole family. He would shout, "The dinner is ready!" And then you would hear all the uncles, cousins, various floors would hear that the family is gathering for dinner. I loved that. This is family life, normal life. Family life is always for me fighting, arguing, shouting. These photos that I'm showing you were taken at the years when family were troubled in business. My father and my uncles were losing a lot of money, and my grandmother were crying all the time. But it also
but they continued a sort of fancy family life we had. And my mother tells me that I am always optimistic, a person open to world. That's how I was. And after so many intimidations and drama, I'm still in a happy morning day, open to the world and happy, and frankly believe that everything will be fine. This is the sad Orhan. Probably there are some worries. I know what's in my head. I still have this chemistry. Angry. I'll have a revenge. I'll show you. I'm saying. I know what I'm thinking. I'm sometimes like that. Now, shall we go upstairs? I'll give you something back. Coming. So this is my archive.
Your archive.
Then we go here. My cousins, my grandfather, my father, uncles, all had mathematical minds. And we have another one here. I was terrorized with my uncle asking me mathematical quizzes when he catches me in the stairs. Maybe I wanted to be an artist to run away from the terrors of mathematics.
For me, a house is where you should have access to your library.
Sitting rooms were not meant to be places where you could hope to sit comfortably. They were little museums designed to demonstrate to a hypothetical visitor that the householders were westernized.
His Museum of Innocence is both a novel about obsessive love and a real museum in Istanbul, which displays all the objects which the characters in the novel touch, see, and hear. It's a collection of objects of desire.
When I was making the museum, every day with my bodyguard behind me, I walked this 11-minute walk. And that was a happy period of my life because I was not writing. I was working with a group of artists to finish the museum. I didn't feel guilty about not writing. I was happy that I have an aim, an artistic aim. I'm accomplishing something and doing with other people. I like working with other people. In the end, I like being in crowds.
He put the money from winning the Nobel Prize into the museum.
Okay, here we are, Museum of Innocence. Aha.
As if in a dream, the museum merges Orhan's own early life, the lives of the thwarted lovers in his novel, and that of Turkey in the 20th century.
Hayatımın en mutlu anıymış.
It was the happiest moment of my life, though I didn't know it. Had I known, had I cherished this gift, would everything have turned out differently? Yes, if I had recognized this instance of perfect happiness, I would have held it fast and never let it slip away.
While I waited for my mother to notice me, I would sit at her dressing table and fiddle with her perfume bottles, lipsticks, fingernail polish, colognes, rosewater, and almond oils. I would rummage through the drawers, play with the assortment of tweezers, scissors, nail files, eyebrow pencils, brushes, combs, and various other sharp, pointed instruments. I'd look at the baby photographs of me and my brother that she had slid under the pane of glass on the table.
My uncle had an American Dodge, D-O-D-G-E, and he would give the key of the car to my father, and my father would put us in a car and we would go to Bosphorus every Sunday, and my father would take a camera. My love of Bosphorus comes from this.
It's a happy family day. We stop and buy fish. We listen to Sunday some music someplace. I loved it when he cracked jokes and he was smarter than any of us. And in fact, I wanted to be like him. These are photos that I shot. I was happy about this picture because very rare my mother embraced, touched my father like this. A romantic photo. There is a sadness with my mother and with my family. First, because my father was disappearing. He was not around. And the reason for this is that he ran away with other women, to tell the truth. And then my mother was left with my father's side. So my mother was living with my grandmother, with my paternal cousins, with my father's brothers, with my father's sisters, while the father was absent. My mother and father sometimes would intensely argue. Tensions upset me. I preferred that when the tensions expressed, they had a fight, and then one of them disappears, then we are left with the other. Though I want this person, my father or my mother, back, they would treat us better when they had a fight. They would go to different places and leave us with my grandmother. Sometimes they would even separate us. And then I wanted to return back to our house and dream of the other Orhan who was left there. It was the idea of my double, which is in German called Doppelganger.
On winter evenings, walking through the streets of the city, I would gaze into other people's houses through the pale orange light of home and dream of happy, peaceful families living comfortable lives. Then I would shudder to think that the other Orhan might be living in one of these houses. I've never left Istanbul, never left the houses, streets and neighborhoods of my childhood. I poured my soul into the city streets, and there it still resides. The city has no center other than ourselves. For me, it's always been a city of ruins and end of empire melancholy. The people of Istanbul simply carry on their lives amongst the ruins.
There was a gulf, of course, between the Nishantashire set and the poor. And the chasm, even back then, was religion.
Our maid, bored of being at home, carried me there, and I liked that place, with its floors carpeted just like at home.
The family attended this, their local mosque, mainly for funerals.
We reduced religion to a strange and sometimes amusing set of rules on which the lower classes depended. My fear, which I shared with everyone in the secular Turkish bourgeoisie, was not of God, but of the fury of those who believed in her too much.
This is what's being said on these names of people. Someone is in love with Begun. What if hopes are finished? We want a miracle. I am bored.
From the moment I learned how to read, the imaginary world inside my head was adorned with constellations of letters. They did not convey meaning or even tell a story. They just made sounds. Walking home from school, even if I was very tired, my eyes would find words.
This is almost Dickensian.
Yes, yes, you're right.
Streets.
The automatic reading machine installed itself in my head. At the same time, my mother had begun to instruct us in the do's and don'ts of life outside.
Merhaba poğaçacı.
Not to buy food from the dirty vendors on quiet streets.
Bir kaşarlı, bir tane de ayrı kağıda koyar mısın lütfen?
Şöyle ayrı ayrı.
Evet, ayrı. Bu hangisi, kaşarlı mı bu?
Patatesli o.
Evet. Diyorsun sen bunları?
Bunlar bizim
Çok teşekkürler.
sağ ol. Sağ ol.
Eyvallah.
Şeker ederim. Sağ ol. Allah razı olsun.
This grocery shop is titled Huzur, a very sophisticated word implying inner peace. I care about names of apartment buildings and names of small streets. Grocery shop names, they are all poetic somehow. And if you put them together, reading them, walking, I used to do that when I was a child, and I'm still doing it. I always wanted to live in a neighborhood where children play in the streets.
Instead, Orhan was in his house, full of pianos and carpets, sparring with his elder brother.
He was strong, my brother, and sometimes father was not around. We were left to each other many, many times. He used to bully me, and then this is normal in my part of the world. I was crying and fighting back and being physical all the time, and my mother, don't fight, enough!
Below in the street, things were hotting up. The first of many military coups came in 1960.
In a country where human rights were violated so much, and in 60s, 70s, 80s, if you're a leftist, there's no way that you can evade government torture, and that in 60s, 70s, if you're doing military service, you would definitely get, if you're not a university graduate, an officer, you would definitely get beaten. If in a country where there was so much physicality, in an upper middle class family, in a westernized, secular, civilized family, we were also struggling and pushing around maybe too much.
When I was here at the university in 70s, left-wingers and right-wingers would shoot each other in these streets. And most of the time, university was boycott, or some group will control it and will not allow the others to come here. It was the nationalist gangs who used gun. In order to survive, you either have to belong to one group or keep your opinions to yourself.
Oh, right. So this was the 1970s?
Yes, this was the subject of Silent House and also Black Book.
The barber was washing somebody's head under the tap. He looked at us in the mirror. "I'll take 2 tickets, guys," he said. "You could have 10, said Mustafa. "You could sell them here." "Leave 2, that's enough," said the barber. 2? I suddenly lost it. "No, not just 2. You'll take 10.
How does Turkey resolve these? How can someone
I think political problems are resolvable, but you have to have less authoritarian, more democratic leadership and more engagement with Europe.
The people who lived in those old wooden houses in the city's outlying neighborhoods were all waiting for a savior, as was the rest of the city in those days, as they are even today. They sincerely believed that if the army stepped in, the price of bread would go down, that if sinners were tortured, the gates of heaven would fly open.
At this radical, turbulent time, Pamuk was studying architecture. One of his tasks was to advise on the preservation of the old Ottoman houses. It was a losing battle.
Many buildings like that in my childhood, and I've seen all burning down, one by one. In 1970s, lazy professors would send us students around to central Istanbul, where there were so many wooden houses. They said, look at the old map and mark this as an old building. Once your building is marked, you cannot destroy it. So they hated us in those neighborhoods. This building is now preserved. The regulations in the 60s were such that you burn it down, then the government said, okay, you can do a building. Then everyone burned their buildings. Now they're tougher. If you burn it down, you can only rebuild it like this. They could have done a 6-floor apartment building here.
Eskileri yok edip, tarihi kalıntıları yok edip tamamen ranta
See, they're destroying the history and making only to make money. He is complaining rightfully.
Ben ama bunları görünce dedim ki müteahhitler gelmiş.
Buraları da mahvetmişler.
Mahvetmek için nasıl plan yapıyorlar onu düşünüyorum.
Onlar da yarıda kaldı.
You read his books. What do you think of his books?
Cümleleriniz çok uzun.
He's saying my sentences are long.
Şöyle bir paragraf. Biraz daha küçülseniz bunları. Şimdi bakın başlangıçta sonu arasında irtibat kurmakta zorluk çekiyoruz.
He could be your editor. It's a UNESCO preservation.
Yes. When I used to come here, there was nothing like this 25 years ago. So they're improving.
It's not been given much respect, has it? Look.
The problem is there. We all want to preserve the past because we also want to have a glamorous identity, Ottoman sophistication. But on the other hand, we also want the comforts of modernity, and then it's very hard to reconcile these.
Turkey's golden age of architecture was long gone. Young Orhan felt despair at what he would now be expected to build, the city it would produce. This is when he gave up painting and dropped out of architecture, a god that had failed.
It was as if my soul were the pristine pages of a notebook. I had learned what was necessary, as well as what was unnecessary, and I had arrived at the end of all the adventures, voyages, and mysteries I could possibly invent for myself.
Pamuk no longer presumed to design his city. Instead, he would dream it, chronicle it, construct it out of words.
In this wretched land of ours, what other path is open to us, except to write?
For 7 years, he would live alone with his mother, writing away. Many of his early books would be based in his eccentric extended family.
As he climbed the stairs, Galip steeled himself for what lay ahead, his mind racing through the scenes with the practiced impatience of a reader leafing through a book he's already read too many times to count. Uncle Melih will be in grandfather's chair, reading the newspaper he's brought down from his own apartment. He will say the usual. That boy's never going to pull himself together. Never.
I think he's a great model for young writers. He was my idol. Not because he was successful or brave or he knew Ottoman history or modernist literature, but because he was patient. He could devote all his hours to writing, to forging sentences. And that's the kind of devotion that I wanted in my life. And I think that's why he inspires so many Turks, young Turks, because of his devotion, like a monk. We want novelists to be wise men and women who come out of their caves maybe every 5 years and deliver us the book.
But it didn't go down so well with Orhan's family.
I was a disappointment for my mother. My brother went to best American university while I am a university dropout. I'm saying I'm going to be a novelist. No one trusts that. Is there anyone successful as a novelist in this poor country in 1970s? My mother was sad about me. There was no prospect of a good life for me, and I also felt guilty about that. These were the saddest years of my life. My cousins, my friends were getting married, and I wouldn't want to go to that wedding because if I was almost 30, 29, and everyone would ask me, Orhan, what do you do? My answer was, I'm writing a novel, and it's not even published, and I'm doing that for 6 years, and everyone would think that, well, my God, this guy is lost. So I would be embarrassed to go there and stay at home and work and hope for a success.
He looked down on a world in chaos. This led to another military coup in 1980. It would haunt his books. This is the time that he began in earnest his pacing around the back streets of the city.
If my fast extinguishing love of painting could no longer save me, then the city's poor neighborhoods seemed prepared in any event to become my second world.
The streets had a consoling power. Streets somehow answered my sentiments of sadness, loneliness, thinking that if you go inward, that inner richness matters.
There was another impulse too. As a novelist, Pamuk wanted to understand the people of Turkey, not just the people of his own class.
Normally, the Turkish intellectuals who want to defend secularism, modernity, all the things that they think define themselves, their approach towards the working classes, they want to educate them, they want to enlighten them, they want to show them what's wrong with them. But Pamuk is not like that. Pamuk wants to be like them. Maybe only in his books, but in his books he wants to be like them. Something designed by Salvador Dali for Alfred Hitchcock. He wants to imagine their lives in detail. So when I met Pamuk, I realized he had this constant way of questioning. So, Kaya, how do you spend your day? When does your girlfriend leave the house? When do you start working? What's your favorite hour during the day? I was like a character to him. And I can imagine him getting excited by a sailor on the street or by a well digger. That's the Pamuk project. So he's building a language in which to communicate the grand story of Turkey to readers who are outside of his class. In Turkey, books are printed just 2,000 copies because that's the readership. But he wants to be read by 200,000.
How many cigarette butts are here?
4,213 cigarettes. These are actually smoked by the beloved. And she was a bit intense and expressed herself through the way she crushed
So the way she stubbed her cigarette?
Yes, stubbed.
Kemal, in the book of the Museum of Innocence, falls in love with his distant relative, Füsun, a shop assistant. They separate, but he obsesses about her for the rest of his life, collecting every cigarette that she'd smoked.
Kemal not only collected them, also wrote a note about her mood. The lover's attention to beloved is very much like the novelist's attention to the world.
Now here there are images of Füsun's hand.
I shot them. I'm proud to say this is my first attempt as a video artist.
And did you audition a lot of people to find?
I identify with Kemal. He falls off from his class.
Yeah.
He falls off because of his love story, which makes him a bit ridiculous. I fell off my class because I wanted to be an honest writer. I wrote about my country, and then, of course, politics is inevitable.
Is there a sense of guilt? You know, you brought up in a privileged environment. So much of your work is reaching out to a different class, to
readers. Yes, there was a feeling of guilt because, exactly as you said, I came from a privileged family in a very poor country. This was strong in me.
The clash with his own class came to a head with his novel Snow. It's set in the 1990s in Kars, meaning snow, in the far east of Turkey. The religious right was now on the rise. Snow's main character, Kar, is not unlike Orhan, but the book tries to get inside the heads of ordinary believers too. Women are committing suicide over being forced to remove their headscarves.
My mother said to me, my friends are saying, why do you pay so much attention to the problems of headscarf? Women. The state was not allowing women into universities if they wear headscarves. 65% of women by nature, by tradition, wear headscarves. In a way, that was making discrimination for women. And that led to popularity of Erdogan because he took them to universities.
I mean, this is very complex, the politics you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It was read like you were taking a position.
My character, Ka, wants two things which contradict. He was out in Europe, now he wants to belong to Turkey and goes to the poorest part of Turkey, just to have a sense of having a community. He also still cherishes European ideals of egalitarianism, respect for women's rights, and more strongly, secularism. But these ideas definitely contradict in that part of the Turkey.
Just 4 years later, things got even more political for Pamuk.
Şöyle bir demeç verdim. 1 milyon Ermeni, 30 bin Kürt burada öldürüldü. Bunlardan çok fazla konuşulamıyor Türkiye'de. Daha sonra bu sözü söylediğim için benim hakkımda dava açıldı. Aslında kastetmek istediğim şey de ortaya çıkmış oldu.
Nationalists were outraged, and Pamuk was charged with denigrating Turkishness.
The case that was opened against me, and the political quandaries in which I then found myself, turned me into a far more political, serious, and responsible person than I wanted to be.
Because of your views about what had happened to the Armenians, you became a target for the nationalists and you went on trial. How did you feel about that?
It felt bad. I confess that it's not something that I want to talk about too much. I don't also want to pose as a victim. One day I'll write about these things in a tender, thoughtful way, but I don't want to shout too much about that. They were bad days. Thank God I survived, very happy, survived back at home and still operating here with my bodyguard, but it's okay. That's the life. I'm happy to be here. The worst disaster is to be an exile for me. I knew what it was to be an exile because for a while I could not return, or I returned like a rat, hiding. Merhaba. Siz marangozsunuz. Efendim sandalyecisi.
The case was dropped, but it resurfaced in 2011 when Pamuk had to pay compensation to the nationalists who had complained against him.
Bir tehdit geliyorsa biz de tanklarımızda, toplarımızda inlerine kadar gireriz ve giriyoruz.
Now the nationalists are helping Erdogan's authoritarian and religious party to stay in power. His message about internal security pours out of every TV set.
Haftada 50, 100 diyorlar. Artık bunlar gidici. Başka çıkışları yok. Ya bu ülkeyi tamamen terk edip gidecekler ve bu işi bitireceğiz. Tek terörist kalmayacak bu ülkede Allah'ın izniyle.
Turkey had changed immeasurably since Pamuk started to write. On the outskirts of Istanbul, green fields had given way to shanty towns to house the millions of newcomers from the east. These, in turn, were swept away and replaced by high-rises.
Don't let rich people make you feel ashamed. The only difference between us and them is that they got to Istanbul first and started making money before we did. Mevlut saw transmission towers, trucks on the asphalt roads and new concrete bridges, and read them as signs that the country was growing and developing. Istanbul had changed so much that his memories now seemed like fairy tales. The city was growing inexorably, out of his reach.
Siz anlatın bana, gece kondunuz vardı. Geldiler.
Ben 51'de geldim.
51'de, evet. Tapunuz var mıydı?
Tapumuz yok.
Hiç olmadı
Kirada
tapun.
oturdum ben.
Kirada oturdunuz.
Kirada, köşkte oturdum ben.
Sonra?
2 tane ev vardı Kırklareli'de. Burası olduğu gibi ormanda, ağaç
Evet,
yani.
biliyorum.
Armut ağacı.
Dere atardı, dere.
Olabilir. Derede yüzerdik biz kurbağalar. Burada yanında yüzerdik.
Evet.
Ondan sonra okulda Kaptanpaşa'da okudum ben.
Evet.
4'e kadar.
Çok memnun oldum. Teşekkür
ederim.
ederim. Görüşmek üzere. Eyvallah.
When the time came for his own one-room house, Mevlut felt his heart breaking. He observed his whole childhood, the food he'd eaten, the homework he'd done, the way things had smelled, the sound of his father grunting in his sleep. Hundreds of thousands of memories all smashed to pieces in a single swipe of the bulldozer shovel.
I'm not a political person. I look at this texture and try to find beauty in it.
Walk, walk, walk. Look around. Enjoy humanity. But the art of the novel, by definition, is political. A middle-class writer spent 6 years to identify with a street vendor. First, you have to get the details right.
You interview a lot of people, you talk. I want to see how people live here. I was here in this cafe, sitting here almost 22 or 23 years ago as we are talking. These places are intertwined with your memories. Oh, I was looking at this street down to sea when I was terribly in love and so sad. And next time you look at that view, you remember your sadness. Oh, you remember this building or that square when you learn about some military coup or a major incident, someone drop a bomb here. You remember that you saw that. These demolitions are hard to endure because you understand that you're losing your memories. I travel around, I go to China, I go to Korea, I go to India. They always ask, so we also want to keep our heritage and we also want to be modern and prominent in the world. What do we do? And it's the most popular question and there's no answer. The only answer that don't be hard on off, pay respect to both sides.
Orhan Bey sırf iş için değil, ara sıra çayımızı içmeye de
Evet, gelirim. Şimdi bunları getirdim buraya ama söz veriyorum geleceğim. Evet.
Sohbet için yani bir mahalle değil burası.
Güzel bir mahalle. Ben buraya 25 yıl evvel röportaja gelmiştim. Aynı yer.
Elimizden kimseye zarar gelmez.
Yok gelmez. Bizim öyle bir korkumuz yok.
Rahatsız etmez.
Bizim öyle bir korkumuz da yok zaten. Evet.
He was uncomfortable talking about sex, but not about kissing. During one of our late-night rucker drinking sessions, I found out that he sometimes associated kissing with visions of a mother seagull putting food into her impatient chicks' open beaks. On one of these nights, he had me smell the spleen perfume Sybil had bought in Paris. It smelled of nighttime and eternity.
The first thing Mevlut would do when he stepped out into the cold was shoulder the yoke he'd been using for 25 years to carry his plastic jugs of boza, the traditional drink made of fermented wheat. Like a soldier about to step onto the battlefield, he would set out on his night's endless walk. He would shout boza and feel he was really calling out to his own past.
Merhaba. Olur.
Reklam mı yapıyorlar? Ne kadar o?
Abla 10 liraya dolar o.
Tamam.
Al taze boza.
I'm happy with friends and I'm writing what they talk about. For example, what do you expect from life? Not necessarily these people are talking. Yeah. If you don't do these beautiful things in this country, you get mad. You pick up.
Okay, that green one.
That green one. Why? Why green?
No.
Wow. This is, for example, ideas for red-haired woman.
Ah.
You know, I had an interview with a well-digger and tells a lot that went into the novel. And then a sort of a shy self-portrait.
Mm. You don't look too happy, though.
Yes. Okay, this is myself. My name in the family was Crow because I was skinny. The desire to paint never stopped. Many years later, I resurrected the painter in me.
I like that one.
I am happier when I paint, when I draw. My mood when I paint is the mood of the guy who is singing when he's having his shower. While when I write, it's more like playing chess.
You love looking at the world from above.
Above or looking at the landscapes. The landscape from my desk. And this is the lady you have been seeing around. As she is now scolding me.
She's scolding me?
Yes. Again, the same lady. Aslı is reading. Once she was exactly reading like this. In some restaurants in Istanbul, they show you the fish first before cooking it. Anyway, I'm happy I'm showing them.
What did you think when you saw his notebooks?
So creative. He observes, and what he observes, he would like to express it on paper. It makes him so happy. So seeing him like a child playing with his notebooks, pens, colors, he's amazing.
I feel embarrassed because I feel as if I'm an autistic child and the mother is talking about me.
It makes him very happy, really. They're precious.
But she's always advising me, don't publish your diaries. And I'm saying, darling, only the pictures. But they'll read the text.
The history of my private life is, in a way, that crowd I enjoyed when I was 8 years old, 10 years old. 50 years later, everyone was alone. Old people died. My uncles, fathers, everyone had business fights with each other. That crowd is a sort of a nostalgia for me. They disappeared. That big umbrella of a big house where everyone gets together, all that disappeared. It's a sadness in my life.
Bağdat Şahini, Bağdat yolu. Sen bir şahinsin. Hadi bakalım.
This is a regular visit to my mother's, which I do on every Sunday. And then we were going to take her out to dinner, three of us.
Canım hoş geldiniz. Hoş geldiniz.
Ama önce ne yapacaksın ya? This teapot was probably 60 years old. Everything my mother is using. Very old kitchen utensils. Pottery in my mother's kitchen actually should go to museum.
Hay diyorum. Merhaba, nasılsınız?
What was he like as a little boy, this one?
He was very naughty, but he was scolded. And then when he was 60, when he said he was scolding me all the time and did not scold my brother.
Yeah. He was jealous of his brother.
Very jealous of his brother.
This cupboard is the spirit of Museum of Innocence. I spent a lot of time in my childhood looking at this swan, now that he is exiled and put in a prison. I don't know what her mistake is, but I was that kind of child, impersonating them and making them speak like in My Name is Red, where the objects, colors speak. I live today to remember it tomorrow. That's why I'm keeping objects, that's why I'm writing. I'm a graphomaniac in a way. Like me, every Sunday, my father used to visit his mother, but he would not take her out to dinner because she would rarely leave the house. The absence of my father, not having a Freudian father who would dominate you, a sort of a liberation you may get if your mind is not oppressed too much. The spirit of red-haired woman is based on lack of my father. The book secretly argues that a lack of father, a lack of a center, a lack of power, a lack of an authoritarian ruler also confuses us. Fathers lend us this liberating feeling that you don't have to make the main decisions. You just follow his footsteps. I am happy that I did not follow anyone's footsteps in my life.
Soldiers had first come for him the night after the military coup. My mother was devastated. She told me that my father was a hero, that I should be proud of him. When my father again disappeared 7 or 8 years after that, it was different. Upon his return, after almost 2 years, my mother seemed not to care that he had been taken away, interrogated and tortured. She was furious at him. What did he expect, she said. So too after my father's final disappearance. My mother seemed resigned. That's what made me think my father didn't always disappear for the same reason. But what is this thing we call thinking anyway?
We have now a very authoritarian system. Democracy is disappearing. My friends who are writers, novelists, are in jail, not because of their novels, yes, because of their journalism. I'm very much upset about that. Our political problems are not very sophisticated. 50,000 people are in jail. 150 journalists are in jail. You don't need too much sophisticated theory to feel angry about that and also feel guilty at home writing your fancy novels. That's the only thing I can do.
Turkey is a dangerous place to be a writer, but it can have its riches.
Orhan Bey tanıdım.
Merhaba. Şuraya bakıyoruz da. Merhaba.
Evet, merhaba, hoş geldiniz.
Bu şimdi niye yarıda mı kaldı burası?
Yok, yarıda
toprak
kalmadı.
dökme yeri mi burası?
Yok, topraklar alınacak.
Ha,
Gidecek.
alınacak.
Yani başlıyor,
Evet.
yeni başlıyor.
Evet.
Binalar yıkıldı, molozları kaldı.
Anladım.
You might have thought that for Orhan Pamuk this would be a vision of hell. But once again, the strangeness of his mind surprises.
I feel so privileged in history of humanity. Are there many writers who see in 60 years their city grow from 2 million to 17 million? And all that change and change and change. And then I was inside all the time. Human anxiety about change and desire about change. Conservatism and modernism. And destroying, 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 and making, and making, and making. And I was chronicling. I have stuck to this subject and write about it, write about it, write about it. They all think that my Istanbul is the nostalgic Istanbul. Yes, I wrote those early books, but now I love this subject. I want to explore it. I want to see the human side of it. This is what I like now.
And in next Sunday's Imagine at 10:30, Alan Yentov meets a woman who for decades has been acclaimed as Canada's greatest living writer. The fearless provocateur Margaret Atwood. You have been warned.